Hey guys, I'm Jamelyn with Backyard Dino, and in this video we're going to talk about the expenses you can expect the first year of raising chickens in your backyard. I wrote up an entire detailed post about this on my blog at backyarddino.com. I'll have the link in the description below. But essentially, raising chickens can be very expensive. The first year you can expect to spend $1,800 on one-time expenses and $600 in repeat expenses. So the most expensive thing that most people will spend with their chickens is the chicken coop. So you can typically go about this in one of two ways. You can do a DIY coop or you can do a kit. So the DIY coop is going to most likely be the least expensive option. And I know that there's a lot of plans online that tell you how to do a DIY coop, what dimensions to use, what measurements. We did that with our chickens to begin with, and it really didn't work out that well. We used some scrap lumber we had at the house and then went out and bought several materials. I detail all of this in the blog, but it cost us about $65 and it took a lot of time. So if you've got the time to build the coop and you've got the construction skills and that's something you enjoy doing, by all means go ahead and do that. But for us, when we moved houses, we didn't take that coop with us and we just bought a kit for here at our new house. It was a lot more expensive, but it's a lot nicer of a chicken coop and it works out really well for us and our birds. You can do a DIY and save some money, but if you're looking to just get a chicken coop and get it put together and have it and it's nice and it looks good, you might want to look at investing in a chicken coop kit. So those can range in price anywhere from $300 to $1,700, and I've seen some for a lot more than that. But for the purposes of this video, we're just gonna kind of say between $300 and $1,700 for the kit. Depending on whether your chickens are going to free range in your yard or you need them to be enclosed, you might consider investing in a chicken run. So a chicken run is an enclosed space for your birds. There's a roof over it as well. And that works out really well if you work during the day and you need a place for your chickens that's secure and will keep them enclosed. So back when we had our DIY coop, we just let the birds roam free in the backyard. They were free range birds for like the first 6 months of their life, and they totally destroyed our yard. We had no lawn at the end of it. They destroyed all the decorative grasses. They got in my potted plants and would make little dust bathtubs in them. They just tore up our yard. So when we moved to the new house and we got the nice chicken coop, we went ahead and bought the coordinating chicken run, and that it attaches on there perfectly and it looks really nice. But it's been a great place for our chickens to spend the day when we're at work or we're not at home to supervise them. So a chicken run kit can cost anywhere from $200 up to $1,200. The next expense you'll have with your chickens are the adoption fees. So there's a few different ways you can buy chickens, okay? So there's 3 ways that I'll talk about. First off is day-old chicks. The second way is from a farm supply store where they're several days old. And then the third way is as started pullets. So if you're buying day-old chicks, what I mean with that is you've ordered them from a hatchery and they ship you the chicks the same day that they're born, and they ship overnight. They arrive at the post office the next day and you go and pick them up. Buying chicks that way costs between $35 and $60. The benefit of buying day-old chicks is that you know that they are healthy and they haven't been exposed to a lot of different illnesses. So when you get them, they're good to go. The other benefit is that you can buy the breed of chickens that you are looking for. If you go to a farm supply company, they really don't have very many options as far as the breeds, and they might be a little bit less healthy just because their environment has had a lot more exposure. So we did extensive research before we bought chickens, and we wanted to find a breed that worked well for our climate out here in West Texas, some hardy birds that could handle the heat. We also were wanting birds that would be very friendly with people. We didn't want birds that were flighty or that wouldn't let us pet them. And we also wanted birds that just looked cool. So that's why we ended up buying our barred Plymouth Rocks, and they've been a really great breed for us. So if you're buying day-old chicks, like I said, that's between $35 and $60 for 10 chicks. As a side note, with the 10 chicks, that's normally the minimum order quantity required for shipping. If you have any less than 10 chicks in a shipment, there is a possibility that they won't stay warm enough and you might lose some birds during the shipment. So that's why there's an order minimum. So if you buy birds individually at a farm supply store, there really isn't a minimum, although I would recommend getting at least 3 birds if you're starting from 0. Chickens are animals that live in a flock and they have a social hierarchy. The chicken that's dominant, and there needs to be some submissive birds as well. So just keep that in mind if you're starting a flock from 0. Buying birds from a farm supply store costs about $5 a bird. Okay, so the third types of birds you can buy are started pullets. So they've skipped the baby phase, they're ready to go. They might be a few weeks away from laying, or they could already be laying. Since someone else put some time and effort into raising them to that point, they're going to be more expensive and typically run about $40 each. So if you're raising your chicks from them being little bitty babies, you'll need to take into account that there's some expenses with that. You'll need to have a brooder. We just used a large cardboard box, like a moving box size, for the brooder. I've seen people put them in plastic totes. I've seen them put them in the galvanized tanks. It doesn't really matter, just as long as you're able to keep the area warm enough for the chicks. So we bought a beginner poultry kit that came with a heat lamp, a feeder, and a waterer. I know there's a lot of people that get freaked out about using heat lamps with brooders, but if you're really careful with it, you don't have flammable material around, and it's situated in a spot where it's sturdy and it's not going to fall down, you really don't have any issue. The main thing is to keep your chicks warm those first few weeks of life while they're still in the brooder box. So the next thing you need to make sure you have for your chickens, of course, are feeders and waterers. So there's several different types of these, and you'll need to do a little bit of research to see what will work best for your birds and for you. I talk about this on my blog. I actually have a post that talks about what to feed chickens at each age, and within that article I talk about the different types of feeders that are available. Essentially, for the feeders, you've got 2 main types. You've got a trough feeder, which is like a cylindrical feeder that sits on the ground, and the birds can just peck in and eat their food. What they also do is knock the food out. So if you're going to use a trough feeder, make sure you only fill it about 1/3 of the way full. Otherwise, the birds will kick out the food and you've wasted it all. The second type of feeder is a tube feeder. This is the most common one and is something we used while our chicks were babies and what they still use today. Now, the deal with a tube feeder is you probably want to hang it from the roof of the chicken coop or the ceiling from inside the run, and you do it about shoulder height with your chickens. This way they're able to eat the food, but they're not spilling it and they're not kicking bedding into it. This way it also keeps them from perching on top and pooping in their food, which is very disgusting, and they will do that if given the opportunity. So the main daily cost you will have with backyard chickens, and by far the most expensive, will be the feed. And if you're raising your chickens in the backyard for eggs and as companion animals, your best bet is just to buy a commercial feed. I know you can probably save money by making your own food, but unless you have several hundred or several thousand chickens, that's really not going to be easy. But if you want to put that much effort into it, go ahead. I don't know how much money you'll save, but what we do is we buy layer feed for our 10 hens. So this layer feed is specially formulated for chickens that lay eggs. It's got the calcium they need so that the eggshells are hard, and I don't have to add any supplements to their food like oyster shells. So with their layer feed, it comes in 50-pound bags, and it's about $20 per bag, and we go through about 2 a month, so it's $40 a month. The interesting thing with their feed is that it varies in price. So I've got some receipts here. Going back to January of this year, their feed was $15 a 50-pound bag. For some reason in June it went up to $19, and then 4 weeks later it was $18. So the price varies, but you can be pretty certain about guessing it to be $20 a bag. However, if you're going to be feeding your chickens the organic feed, it's considerably more expensive. So take a look at that and see if it's something you want to do. We don't do that with our chickens. We feed them commercial feed and supplement that with kitchen scraps, and they steal things from the garden too. So I did talk about supplements a while ago, about oyster shells. We don't do that with our chickens. They actually hate oyster shells and will not eat them. But we do offer grit free choice. Now the deal with grit is chickens don't have teeth to break up their food. They peck food to make it small enough where they can swallow it, and it goes into their crop and eventually into their gizzards. In their gizzard is where the grit or tiny little rocks will break apart the food, doing the same function that our teeth do when we eat. As they eat and as they digest more food, that grit breaks apart and it needs to be replenished. If you feed your chickens commercial feed, you probably don't need a grit supplement because the food is small enough pieces for them to digest easily. However, if your chickens have a lot of kitchen scraps or they free range, you might consider offering grit. When they need it, they'll eat it. One thing about the grit that we feed our chickens is it comes with a probiotic, which is beneficial in helping to prevent chickens from getting sauerkraut. So it's just a really good thing. I offer it to my chickens. They seem to like it. It's not that expensive. You buy a bag and it lasts for like an entire year. So it's definitely worthwhile just buying it. The next expense you have with your chickens that will be repeat is the bedding. Now, I've seen online, there's a lot of different options that people use for bedding for their chickens, but what we use and what's worked out really well for us is pine shavings. They're super easy to find. You can get them at any farm supply store, and they're about $6 for an 8 cubic foot bag. So we use this bedding in their coop. We do maybe like 2 or 3 inches in depth. It works out great for our birds. It keeps the coop smelling relatively fresh. The chicken poop gets absorbed in that, so it makes it easier to clean that up. In addition, it provides a soft landing spot for chickens when they're jumping from the roosting bars to the floor. We previously used the pine shavings in the nesting boxes as a covering, but the chickens would kick it out and then there would be no covering in the nesting box and it would just be the wood. And when the eggs were being laid, they'd hit on the ground and they would crack or break totally. And it was just making a really big mess. So I went online, I did some research, and I came across these things called nesting pads. And they're totally amazing, and I recommend them to anybody who has backyard chickens. So what they are they're little squares of shredded wood material that is kind of fluffy. I call them the chicken mattresses. And I put them in the nesting boxes. And the chickens like to lay eggs on them because it's clean. They're not able to scratch the nesting pads apart. And so our eggs are coming out cleaner and they're coming out less broken. So they're a great investment. You can buy a pack of 10 of those for about $20. So you don't really have anything to lose with that. We replace them maybe once every 2 or 3 months. So it's really good to do. I have a few posts on my blog that talk about the nesting pads a little bit more, and I've got some photos of those if you wanted to go check that out. So there you have it, your first year expenses with chickens. You've got the chicken coop and run, which can run you about $1,700. The adoption fees and everything, all the equipment you need to get started, about $100. And then your repeat expenses, that includes your food, your bedding, your grit, your scratch, which I didn't talk about. My chickens love their scratch. It's a treat. It's not meant to be a meal, but they love that. So all of those things combined over the course of a year is about $600. So here's what we do. Every month we budget $40 for our chickens. We have it in our envelope here for our chicken cash. Whenever we sell eggs, we put that money, we add it to the envelope. So this is how we pay for our chickens, is with this envelope. And it works out really well. We're not overspending, and we know like roughly how much we're spending every month on the chickens. But whether you're able to sell the eggs or not, at the end of the day, raising chickens can be a bit expensive. So as long as you know the expenses to look forward to before you get chickens, maybe you won't be as surprised as I was, because I really didn't know how expensive they would be before we bought them. Everywhere on the internet said you can do a DIY coop, it'll work out great. It just didn't work out for us. So we had to spend a lot more money, but it was because we just wanted something nice that we wouldn't have to worry about later. So if you like this video, comment below, subscribe to my channel, and I'll have a new video out in a couple of days.